Good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Friday, July 5th, 2019. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. Tonight I want to talk about what else? I want to talk about what it really means to be anti-war, what it means from a libertarian perspective to be anti-war. It's not a new topic. It's not one that hasn't been discussed a billion times before by libertarians in the past, but I think it's just kind of an important thing for us to all get back under our belts. I wrote a piece earlier in the week called "On the Importance of Being Anti-War." It was mostly a eulogy to the great Justin Raimondo and his passing from lung cancer a little over a week ago. Now, Justin was 67 years old. He smoked like a chimney, and it eventually caught up with him. And that's not the sad part of the story. The sad part of the story is that we lost one of the most cogent and trenchant voices in the anti-war movement, a man who helped co-found antiwar.com, a site that I've been a big supporter of in the past, a site that I realized very early on, along with Lou Rockwell, would form the nexus of the opposition to the post 9/11 imperial America. It was very obvious at that point in time that the Libertarian Party wasn't up to the task, and I grew very sour on the Libertarian Party for that reason. And this was something that we knew it was a long time coming, and we knew it was an inevitability, no matter how many times Justin would tweet out that he was feeling better, or that the treatments were working or whatever. Apparently, the drug protocol he was on gave him an extra 18 months, so isn't that great? Whereas the Rickenbacker, it's off screen. So, that article brought a lot out of me. And some stuff I hadn't talked about in a long time. We spend so much time talking strategy and tactics, and what does this speech mean? What does this headline mean? What is this connecting dots about all of these events? We forget sometimes to back up and look at why we're here in the first place, and why we know what we know. We know what we know today because of guys like Justin Raimondo. I mean, 20 years ago when I was reading Raimondo for the first time, and I would talk about his articles with friends of mine who were, at that point, far more worldly about current events or about world affairs than I was, would look at me and just say, "What are you talking about? The guy's freaking..." I actually literally had one guy call him an anti-Semite, and I'm like, and this is a friend of mine who I would consider the closest thing to alt-right that I know today. It's just interesting how things change, because what Raimondo was talking about at the time was so outside of the current frame of reference. Was, as I put it in the article, introducing us all to a world none of us knew even existed. That it was just shocking. And the natural reaction when you hear something shocking is to attack it. So Raimondo was not, even as a gay man, was not one of these, left libertarians who was crazy for, and focus on gay rights and smoking pot and all of this, what's the word I'm looking for? No boundaries style libertarianism. He wasn't that kind of person. He wasn't of the Star Child variety, the guy who ran for LP chair, in a thong, and ran for Congress in a thong. And, Star Child is kind of a legend in libertarian circles, and, and nothing against that, him or anybody else like that, and that have been attracted to the movement over the years. But there's a fundamental split in the libertarian movement between those who want no restrictions, who are attracted to it because it gives you effectively no restrictions on your behavior. It tacitly because it doesn't. You can be whoever you want to be as long as you choose not to incite or and aggress people, incite violence or aggress other people. Be who you are. Bonsai. We applaud that individuality, but at the same time, there is the recognition, and this comes from the hard paleo right, which is where Justin Raimondo came from, where Lou Rockwell comes from, Tom Woods and others, Murray Rothbard, Mises, who understand that in a world of inviolate property rights and the respect for other people's own property rights, that there's a tremendous amount of restraint that's placed on your behavior at that moment when you realize that you have to respect other people's property rights because you want yours respected. And then all of a sudden, it becomes a much more polite society when you realize that everybody has the right to defend themselves and everybody has the right, both physically and rhetorically or whatever, without restriction and without boundaries. But at the same time, that the society itself will invariably opt towards a much more conservative, traditional lifestyle, because that is the most predictable. That is the one that creates the least amount of stress and the least amount of confrontation, which is the way everybody gets their personal property rights in themselves and in their personal property and extended into their personal property, gets that respected. And the closest thing we have to a functional anarchic society today in the world that I know of, or that I have any kind of contact with, are the Amish. The Amish are all various sects of Amish are effectively anarcho communities, narco-capitalist communities. And to be consistently anti-war is to be, and the Amish take it to the extreme. They're just effectively pacifist. Now, I'm not pacifist in any way. Old goats and guns, right? I'm not a pacifist in any way, but I'm also at the same time, war is not what people do. People have disagreements and they figure out a way to settle that disagreement without violence generally. And if they do go get the violence, well, it's individuals doing it. And eventually they either kill each other or beat each other up until they decide to stop beating each other up. But then it's localized and it's over and it's done with. Then maybe it branches out from family to family or whatever, and horrible and horrible things are done to each other. I can't come up with the right word. Injustices are done to each other, and that's fine, but it's all localized. It's the end of the day, it's localized. It's not 200 million people going to war with 80 million people and 50 million people dying in the process and bombs being dropped and military hardware and lives appropriated in the whole 9 yards. We talk about these things all the time. We talked about in these abstracted terms, the military industrial complex and the neocons and the this and that, all of this stuff, forgetting the tremendous individual cost, human cost of all of these things. We don't forget them, but they're kind of abstracted in our regular discussion, certainly here on this channel and in many other channels when we talk about politics. Because, as I said in the article the other day, foreign policy is just war by other means. Okay? It's not foreign policy. If your foreign policy is aggressive in any way, manner, shape, or form to try and get something that is unearned. It's what governments do. Governments already are appropriating unearned capital in the first place, creating, garnered via taxation, garnered via the gun, and then they use that unearned capital to then try and garner wealth, garner more unearned capital by stealing it from other people across an arbitrary political border. It doesn't matter doesn't matter how far away they are. They can be on the other side of the world and be, unsavory brown people who have the temerity to say no. In this case, Iran, or it could just be, Canadians. Remember, Americans fought a war with Canada at some point, so don't kid yourself. So, Raimondo no longer being here is something that is hard. It's hard for me to deal with, and he's not been with us from a public perspective for a while now. And I know I've talked about this in times in the past, but someone is going to have to step up and take that job. I don't know who that person is going to be. I know I'm doing my very best to fill that role, but I can't fill that role all the time. I can't fill that role every day. It's going to have to be taken over by a variety of other people. I mean, we've lost Justin Raimondo and Robert Perry in the last 7 months. Two very different people coming from two very different places in the political spectrum, and yet incredibly important for who they were. So, but the funny part about it is, if you ask anybody, are you for or against war? Almost everybody will say, no, I'm never for war. I'm not for. I don't want war. I'm anti-war. Are you? Really? Under what circumstances will you go to war? You go to war if your president's insulted? You go to war if some jackass in an Iranian parliament, in a parliament halfway around the world, screams death to America? Just some guy with a freaking attitude. Should Iran take, some representative from Tennessee seriously when he says death to Iran any more than we should take it seriously when some jackass in Iranian parliament says death to America? Are we all so triggered and so sensitive and so insecure that we can't handle it when somebody says something mean about us? And who are we? Are we America? The guy, the rep from Tennessee, when he says death to Iran, means the Iranian government. And when the jackass in Iranian parliament says death to America, he means the American government. Are we the government? Are we going to go to war? Or that's not how we're going to justify going to war with Iran, because we've been gaslit here at home and propagandized into thinking that they're just evil brown people who want to kill everyone? Now, we know that's not the truth here on this channel, and I understand that. I understand that most of the people listening to me tonight understand that. But you have to remember that our natural instinct is to bandy together in an in-group, out-group bias, a paradigm, right? That, America, love it or leave it. Well, I just kind of like it. Can I live on the Canadian border kind of thing? Well, no, you can't. You have to choose. In times of stress, you have to choose. Are you part of the group, or are you not part of the group? And a guy like Justin Raimondo, after 9/11, kept saying, I'm not part of the group. And he was hated for it. The libertarians in general were hated for it, because everybody wanted you to be completely and utterly subservient to the idea of America, because America was attacked. So now America was attacked, you were attacked, that's that. Doesn't matter what the circumstances where the attack was. Doesn't matter whether there were sections of our government that may or may not have been complicit in it. It doesn't matter about any of these things. What mattered was that you were part of the tribe, because the tribe was under attack. Everybody knows that when the tribe is under attack, that's the way you're gonna act. It was a low point for being a libertarian in 2001. So when I started the Alachua County Libertarian Party in late 2000. A year later, there was 9/11. Okay, you know how hard it was to not be able to walk into stores that 2 weeks earlier were begging us to leave pamphlets on their counter, and then they were throwing us out of the store. Had that happen in multiple gun shops in Alachua County, by the way. So never forget that you're being used during those times. Everybody is. To advance an agenda of evil men who placed you in the position to make that choice for their own evil ends. This is what Justin Raimondo did. This is why he reminded us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 20 years what the stakes were and why you never gave the empire an inch. Because if you give them an inch, they'll take it. It's the same thing today, we can never ever give them an inch. When I argue with people as to why are you still a libertarian or why are you still anarchist, that stuff's not fucking practical. I'm like, well, yeah, I know it does. That's irrelevant as to where I want to. It's irrelevant about where we want to be tomorrow, where we are today. It's not where we are. It's where we want to go. If you don't understand where it is that you want to go, you'll never figure out how to fucking get there. You'll just be Odysseus walking around trying to find your way home, having been thoroughly confused by the gods, in this case, the media, your government, the Davos crowd, the rest of them who control the friggin' informational spigot. You'll walk around in a fugue not knowing what to do, not knowing the way anywhere. You have to know. It's a signpost. You have to have your direction set. It's what the non-aggression principle is for. I've argued this before and I'll argue it again. The non-aggression principle is not a consequence of being anti-war. You don't become anti-war first and then decide, yeah, the non-aggression principle is a good idea. No. You embrace the non-aggression principle, which states categorically that you do not have the right to use aggressive force to achieve social or political goals, period. From that stems all other considerations. The most important which is that you do not cotton the state in any way, and you do not allow the state to go to war with other people. So that two governments, because remember, governments fight and people get killed. Never forget that. Governments fight, people get killed. Right now, we're dealing with just extreme levels of Team Red, Team Blue everywhere we look. We're shutting down our right brains. We're shutting down our ability to think intuitively and think critically. It's just, there's purely just freaking scripts running in our heads. Orange man bad. Democrats suck. Iran evil. Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. What do we know about these things? And we don't set, and here we are as Americans. We're supposed to be the ones who set the shining example. We're the ones who are supposed to be the shining house on the hill that everybody wants to emulate, but nobody wants to emulate us anymore. Look at us. Not the rank and file, not the 95% of America that's not part of the freak show. The 5% of the 5% that's the freak show runs everything. The bicoastal libs, the neoconservatives in Washington, the neoliberals and the globalists on Wall Street, and whatever the media wants to portray for us as being normal now. The rest of us just going about our days trying to figure out how to make enough money to have lunch and not have it not suck. And we wonder why everything costs so goddamn much. War. We wonder why everything is falling apart. War. We spend money on bombs. We don't spend money on roads. And then when we do spend money on roads, all we do is resurface the roads that we resurfaced the year before in a make-work project in order to boost GDP, in order for some goddamn feckless son of a bitch and warmongering, bombing fucking president can get goddamned reelected. The war on poverty created more poverty. The war on drugs created more drug users. The war on terror has created more terrorism. Every time government goes to war, whether it's a humanitarian war, just war intervention or not, they're always, by the way, they're always Christian just war. They're always Christian. They always satisfy Christian just war theory. Always. Because we always have to be the goodies. We can't possibly be the baddies. We have to be the goodies. It always has to be sold to us this way. It's the only reason we haven't gone to war with Iran yet. So we haven't been able to goad them into striking us first so that we can then feel justified and carpet bombing them. I'm going to get to all of your comments, and some of which are very, very good and contra to this narrative that I'm spinning in just a few more minutes. Because I'm going to address some of the comments that were just made. There is no greater cause than ending state-sponsored violence. There is no greater cause than ending state-sponsored violence. The problem is, once you state it in those terms, there is no greater cause than ending the state. Period. Because everything the state does is violence. By definition, the state is violence. Government is fire. So when I watched, now we talked about this a little bit on Monday, when we watched what happened in North Korea on Sunday, I don't know about you, but I was genuinely, one, shocked, and two, ecstatic to see Trump walk over the line into North Korea, sit down with Kim Jong-un, and have a conversation. Can't come to an agreement about anything if the leaders don't like each other. The only thing that Trump has done well in foreign policy wise in his presidency to date is to try and build good relationships with the people who are his quote unquote enemies, with the exception of Iran. And this is what he should be doing. But Iran won't talk to him. And with good reason, Iran won't talk to him. Iran shouldn't talk to him. Because Iran can't talk to him given the situation that he's put them in. Which he's done nothing but beat them over the head with a stick. And now he says, I want to talk on no conditions. Let's just talk. If you don't get what I want, I'm still going to put more sanctions on you. Like, then there's no point in talking. Iran doesn't want a relationship with the United States. This is what's galling Trump and Netanyahu and everybody else. Iran doesn't want a relationship with the United States. They don't want to come to the table and foster an agreement with the United States. They don't want it. They know it's worthless. Iran's government at this point is effectively post-U.S. So like people like the people in this stream, like myself, who are post-Facebook. Like, I'm just fucking over the United States. Fuck you. We're done. We're not talking to you anymore. We don't have to. Putin will do our talking for us. Xi will do our talking for us. We don't need to talk to you. But, hey, if you want to start acting like a fucking human being, then maybe we'll talk. Because when Iran did try to talk to us, we didn't listen to them. Foreign minister was, going around Europe, ready to talk to everybody, going on a charm tour. When's the last time you saw the Iranian foreign minister go on a charm tour around Europe? It's stupid, silly, it's asinine. All for what? All for what? What are we going to get out of this? We're going to finally get our war with Iran? There's no way to stop it? It's very possible. Don't kid yourselves. Nothing Trump has done in the last 2 weeks has told you that war with Iran is off. Postponed? Possibly. Is he just trying to separate North Korea from Iran? As I've said from the beginning, if you want to solve Iran, solve North Korea. Show somebody somewhere that you have the ability to cut a deal and enforce it. I'd like to see that. Hey, how about you prove to everybody, Don, because this is very important now, beyond just talking. I love the fact that he went and talked. But at the end of the day, talk is cheap and whiskey costs money. Right? You're going to stop these wars? You're going to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons? What the fuck are you doing pulling out of the INF treaty? What are you doing pulling out of the NPT? What are you doing not forcing Israel's feet to the fire to sign the NPT for the first time ever? If you're so goddamn against nuclear weapons, why aren't you forcing our greatest ally in the Middle East to actually become a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty? Why? Because you don't actually control them. They control you. It's the biggest bunch of horse shit I've ever heard. You want to put up or shut up in all this? You want China to sign the INF Treaty? Get Israel to sign onto the NPT. Then maybe everybody will take you freaking seriously. Otherwise, you're just talking. And nothing means anything. nothing means anything. So we're not out of the woods yet, folks. Good start, no follow through. Bombs haven't flown yet. But what does that really mean? So far, it's good. The fact that he's actually got the North Koreans thinking in terms of there's a possibility for a future for their country. I watched a 15-minute video release from the North Korean Ministry of Propaganda, for all intents and purposes, your North Korean state media. 15 minutes talking of a digest or a summary of what happened. You know, how great it was that Trump and Kim met, and the difference and the text of this thing was striking. How happy they were, how optimistic they were that things would change. From that perspective alone, Donald Trump has already been a more successful president than Barack Obama in any way. In every way. He doesn't have to do anything else. The guy could just decide not to run for re-election and walk off into the sunset. He would be more successful than Obama. That's not saying much. But it was a monumental thing the other day. But it's not enough. It's not even close to enough. He's got a lot to do to undo the damage he's done already. And for that reason. And the truth of the matter is that it's not just him, I know, but it doesn't matter. He's the president, he's in charge. There are all these people acting against him, tough shit. Get them fired. Move on with your life. Do what needs to be done. You're the president, act like it. All right, I'm going to go back and read some of the comments. Mark Bogosian, war is simply government action through other means. Clausewitz, exactly. No one back then, User 13 reminds us, wanted to say the Patriot Act was bullshit publicly. I got tons of flack for doing so. I actually went to rallies here in Gainesville, right next to the Communist Party and the Libertarian Party, sitting right next to the Communist Party, doing tables at an anti-Patriot Act event where we went over in grave detail each of the Bill of Rights of the Patriot Act literally gutted. And of course, that was also one of Camille's finest moments when she started arguing with a bunch of communists who said, well, everything should be communal. She's like, great, I'm cold. Can I have your shirt? I need to go get an iced cake. I want to go get something to drink. I'm thirsty. Can I have your car? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, then you're not a fucking communist. Shut up. I love Camille. All right. Dragon M says that all of Congress and the Senate are indoctrinated to be total warmongers. Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, the lobbyists do an amazing job of brainwashing these brainless tools, and the intelligence agencies fill their heads with nonsense and all this crap. It's I know, I get it. When both intentions is when both Team Red and Team Blues are pro-war, it takes war out of the discussion. The common knowledge is that everybody agrees war is just and good. Which is why the libertarians are always right, and why the co-opting of the Libertarian Party by the neocons is one of the saddest things I've ever witnessed. Canada is no haven for Americans. Great. This discussion, says TomTom, highlights how this nation has lost its soul to me. Death and destruction is an unpopular position because the propaganda is so thick. Mm-hmm. The mainstream stuff is not practical either. At least with libertarianism, you can stand for something. Tension, you're absolutely correct. That's the other thing. It's like, look at these people. They govern from the center. They govern. The only thing they believe that they show that they believe in when they govern is that they want more for themselves. Right? That's all they're doing when they're governing. They're just like trying to figure out how they can get more for themselves, and that's all that's their operating principle. Right? Yeah. So at least with libertarianism, if you're not. It's not practical. You just say, look, I know it's not pragmatic today, but you still have to have something to look to go forward. You have to look forward to. You got to be able to figure out what it is. You got to know what you want in order to figure out how to get there. And so with that in mind and that filter in place, you can do a pretty good job of analyzing policy without even having to like be all that fucking smart. Just consistently apply the non-aggression principle and just don't be a douchebag about it when you argue about it. Unless you're me. All right. Tom says he does have to give credit to Trump for not pulling the trigger on Iran despite debate, although our actions against them are still immoral. The UK seized one of their oil tankers, and note that was also clear provocation after Trump said it. Iran will be obliterated if they attack anything of the US's. So Theresa May and MI6, they went out and they they went out and grabbed an Iranian oil tanker in order to, again, as bait, to try and get Iran to strike back at the UK so that Trump can turn around and go, you attacked one of our allies, prepare for death and destruction and all of that shit. I'm like, yeah, but the Iranians should still seize British assets. They should still seize a British oil tanker. That would be fucking hilarious. That's serious. It would just highlight just how fucking useless the Brits actually are. Trust me, it would be hilarious. Just hilarious. It would be terrible because the outcome would be terrible. But for the first 20 minutes, I would be laughing my ass off, and then I would be digging a fucking bunker. All right. The U.S. So the military media industrial complex is an Orwellian freak show. It's as bad as the decline of the Roman Empire. I'm waiting for Trump to declare a horse as senator. Ivanka Trump is his deputy chief of staff. Jared Kushner is one of his top foreign policy advisors. Sean Batchelder reminds us about the Moon of Alabama article on July 3rd, which we've all talked about here before. But yes, that the U.S. tried to get Iran to shoot down a manned spy plane that flew over Syria Island and Abu Musa, not once, but twice. I know. Iran, now the thing about that story, and I'll just bring this up to play devil's advocate, not that I really believe this, I believe we did it, is that the Iranians haven't made a big deal about this. And you would think that at this moment in time, that they would have released all this information and been, screaming bloody murder about it. But then again, also note that we have violated their airspace many, many times in the past couple of years, and the Iranians have not said anything about it either until it was opportune. So they may be saving this one for later. The evangelicals, which the USA calls Christians, are not Christians, and their warmongering actions are the opposite of Christianity. Yeah, they're just quote-unquote Christian Zionists. That whole Judeo-Christian culture, the Judeo-Christian tradition, is bullshit. That's something that the neocons made up in the 50s. Well, the people who are we call today, they're called the neocons, but the Trotskyites in the 50s created that shit. Sanctions are an act of war, I agree. We've been at war with Iran for, 15, 30, 40, 50 years now? Interesting question. If we are so great, how many other nations have adopted our principles? So Mike Bernard, Dragan says to Mike Bernard back that the most likely outcome is that Iran will get their oil from Russia or Chinese tankers, and that the Brits won't dare touch those ships. They only pick on weaker countries. That's possible. The Iranians, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Right, if the Russians and the Chinese start sending unused oil tankers to Iran to load tankers to then ship those and insure those tankers themselves, which they could easily do, then it would be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. That is one angle on this that I hadn't thought of yet, so that's interesting. There's an air of apocalypse. Immanentize the Eschaton. Oh God, yeah. My partner and I, if this thing fails, this whole gold, goats, and guns media thing fails, we're just gonna throw caution to the wind, cash in our cryptos, and open a bar and call it the Eschaton. Telling you. Like, we're gonna have Thunderdome. We're gonna have a Mad Max special on Tuesday nights. Cage matches. We'll have cage matches on Tuesday night. It'll be great. No, come on. Welcome to the Eschaton. Fireball? Yeah, fireball. 2-for-1 fireballs on Tuesday nights. The whole 9 yards. Come on, it'd be great. there's an underlying religious element to all this that's a touchy subject. The evangelical Christian element wants to bring about the end of times. That to me is shocking. Well, yeah, and and never let it. What? And shall I like put on my alt-right hat for a minute and go and yeah, see? No, I can't do it. I can't. I'm not going to even go there. I'm not going to go there. It'll just get me banned from YouTube. So why the hell should I do it? No, I'm not going to do it. So. Doug Murray reminds us that whiskey can be cheap, but don't try to impress your friends with that stuff. Yeah, it usually comes from Canada. There's some very good, that's not to say there's not some very good Canadian whiskeys, but the really, really bad whiskeys are all fucking Canadian. Oh my God. It's just, and it comes down, and it's just chemistry, right? It's just the Arrhenius equation. At the end of the day, it takes a long time in cold weather to mature whiskey. The colder the temperatures, the longer it takes to mature a decent whiskey into something smooth and drinkable. That's why 12-year-old scotches taste so good and 10s and 8s taste like shit. Got news for you. It's just because of the fact that Scotland's cold, right? You can get a 6-year rum that tastes that's more mature than a 12-year-old scotch. It's just because it's warm in the Caribbean, right? So you get a 12-year-old rum and that shit's like a 30-year-old whiskey, like a 30-year-old scotch, okay? Because of time and temperature. It's all time temperature transformation curves. That's all it is. So that's why you can get away with a good 6 or 9 year Kentucky whiskey, but you really need 12 years to get a good Canadian whiskey or a good scotch. It's just that simple. The U.S. started the Mexican War by sending the army south of the Spanish border into Texas to provoke a fight. They will do the same with Iran. They've already done it, Juan Isaac. And so far, the Iranians have not taken the bait, thankfully. On the eve, yeah. So it's hard. It is hard with boots on the ground. I have not heard of a war being fought without some kind of boots on the ground, says Pat Hat. You're right. The LP has been co-opted since the 1980s. Not really, Jonathan. The worst of the co-opting of the Libertarian Party really happened when in 2002 and 2004 when the platform got changed and everything else. But no, up until that, it began then. But it was not but it had not reached the level of actually having control of the LP National Executive Committee. That happened in 2004 when they changed the platform. Okay. In America, war is a spectator sport. Possibly. Arkval says, let's not forget that William Rule of Law Barr, like Kavanaugh, was a huge proponent of the Patriot Act. Well, Barr was just hired by Trump to clear him of Mueller. And there's going to be a pro to that quid. You just know it. So, or the quo to that quid. Just, you know it. There won't be a war with Iran because the Iranians are too smart for the likes of Bolton and Pompeo. But it's not just Bolton and Pompeo. If it goes this, if they continue to say no to all this, at some point, there's going to be an actual false flag where we'll fly the plane over Iran and then we'll shoot it down. We did this with MH17 for Christ's sake and had the Dutch like fake all the fucking data. Okay? So don't think that it's beyond the realm of possibility. Don't think that. You're underestimating your opponent if you think that. Your opponent is, and you know who your opponent is, don't ever underestimate them. This is just Sun Tzu. The Iranian oil tanker, a gold parachute for Teresa's retirement. Yeah. Does anybody think the early U.S. Republic can be restored? No. Even another government under the Articles of Confederation would be an improvement. The Articles of Confederation were far superior to the Constitution. That is blasphemy in this channel. I'm sorry, I'm being like overly dramatic because I'm triggered. I actually love the Articles of Confederation because it gives the central government no fucking power except to like sign some treaties and nominate some monuments. And the reason the Articles of Confederation failed is the same reason, in many ways, the same reason that the EU is failing, which is that there was no way to consolidate the debt from the Revolutionary War. And that was the big problem. And Martin Armstrong's made this point before, and for the most part, I agree with him. And that the states couldn't reconcile how to pay off the war debt, and therefore, eventually, we had to create a national currency in order to be able to pay off the war debt. That's really what it came down to. But the Articles of Confederation, as a government type, far superior to the Constitution. The Constitution's way too powerful, just unbelievably too powerful. So, we have always been at war with Eurasia. Yes, Doug Murray. I agree. Lebowski 2020. This aggression will not stand, man. You're right. Exactly. Walter? Tom knows his booze. Tom knows his chemistry. And if you know your chemistry, then you know your booze. The fermentation process is also slowed by the cold. You're absolutely right. But the extraction process from the wood barrels that are used to leach out all the really nasty fusel oils and shit that are created during the fermentation process, that give whiskey its hard edge, and then can replace that with all the lovely flavors that are in the wood of the cask of the cask that it's barreled in. It's a very important process. The casking of whiskey is what mellows the whiskey out. So it filters it out. It's why Jack Daniels uses they use activated charcoal, right? Which is another way to filter out all the really nasty, higher end. We call them the fusel oils, which are basically the propanols and the butanols and the pentanols that are created in very small quantities during fermentation. When the yeast produce, I'm going to go off on a rant here because this is far more interesting now than talking about everything else. Booze is cool. When yeast ferment sugars, they don't just create alcohol, right? Also a whole bunch of shit. The healthier the yeast are, the higher the percentage of just ethanol that they produce. Now, there are no isomers of ethanol. There's methanol, then there's ethanol. Those two structures you can't rearrange the molecules and make a different shape out of them. When you get the propanol though, you can make a straight chain, or you can make a T. So because you got 3 carbons, you got to make a T, or you can make so you got either isopropanol, or you've got straight chain propanol, right? So it's not a chain. Sorry, it's just 3 long, but you can put the OH group, the hydroxyl group on propanol. You can either put it on the central carbon, you can put it on one of the end carbons. And it changes it. The formula of the molecule is exactly the same, but the orientation of the atoms in the molecule are completely different. That's what makes isopropanol different from propanol. Makes it different from butanol, M-butanol, tert butanol. With butanol, you've got 3 or 4 different versions, and so you have to know all these things. So and orientation matters. It changes the chemistry. It changes everything. So you need to know this if you're an organic synthesist, which I never was, but I did study. But you also know that you create some of those things, and the healthier the yeast are, the less of those other byproducts of the fermentation products they produce. So you always want to create for the yeast an incredibly healthy environment where they produce the highest, where your percent yield, speaking as an organic synthesis, your percent yield is as high as possible. But there still may be 1% to 2% of this crap. The distillation process will not be able to take out all of those. It will take out some of them. This is why most pot stills are copper, because copper helps to catalyze either the oxidation of those fusel oils and the butanols and the propanols and the pentanols into organic acids, which are not volatile. They dissolve in water, and they just stay behind in the mash. And they don't ever go up the distillation column, and therefore you clean them out that way. That's why pot stills are made out of copper. That's one. And then 2, you can also control the temperature of the distillation because they all volatilize, they all vaporize at different temperatures. So if you keep the pot still at a certain temperature, then you can also fractionally distill them off by drawing them off early. You can draw the methanol off early because it's more volatile than ethanol. You just throw the first cut away when you're distilling, because that first 5 or 10% is going to be filled with all the methanol, and you want to get rid of that shit. So you just throw that away, and you only take the middle 90%, and you leave the last, and all the heavier organics will come out later at higher temperatures as the boiling point of the solution rises. As the ethanol is drawn off, the boiling point rises, and then you'll start to get all these other all the other heavier elements will come out, or compounds will come out at that point. You just cut the distillation off at that point and stop. Leave it behind. You left some ethanol in the mash, but you didn't get all the nasty shit that makes the booze taste like shit. Then you take that cask strength stuff, which is anywhere from 65 to 70% alcohol. You stick that into a friggin' wood cask and you let it sit for 6 to 8 years. And eventually, it won't taste like ass. All right. There is simply too much, now into a completely different subject, back to reality. There is simply too much convexity in a long bond to start a war. Got a pricing credit risk. What he means by convexity is that the yield curve is inverted, that it's not upwardly sloping, that it's cratered, right? It's not upwardly sloping like the what do you call the viewer count for tonight's stream, which always starts strong and then starts to level off until we get to a steady state between 75 and 90. It's got a dip. It's got a massive dip in it. Like, I lost connection for 5 minutes. That is possible, Tim Cutler. I'm not going to argue with you about that. I do believe at a certain level that I know Trump doesn't want a war, but I also know that he could easily be frog marched into one. Okay. So, do you think Pence canceled his trip to New Hampshire because of the Russian submarine fire? No, I think it was because they were expecting Iran to shoot down the plane. And they were expecting to start a war. Tom, have I ever read an economic interpretation of the Constitution by Charles Beard? No, I have not. It sounds like something I should read. The great Brett Harris is in the house. Reckless Abandon says U.S. aid launches program countering malign Kremlin influence framework. What the fuck sort of aid is that? It's a slush fund for NGOs. That's what U.S. aid is, isn't it? Hey, Tom, do you ever talk about people pushing non-white immigration? Other than the very general terms, no. I think it's reprehensible. I think it's silly. I think it's all those things. I'm not an open borders libertarian. Matter of fact, people who are open borders libertarian fall into the first category I talked about early on, and that these are the people that don't want no restrictions on their behavior, and so they fundamentally believe that, well, we have to take to heart our peaceable people crossing arbitrary political borders should be allowed to do so. The problem is that it's defined peaceable in an age of in an arena of a warfare state and a welfare state. It doesn't work. They're incompatible with each other. Once you get rid of the warfare state and the welfare state and the wealth redistribution via taxes for political gain, well, then we can start talking about whether or not we're going to have open borders or not, because at that point, political borders won't really matter. We'll be at the closest thing you'll ever get to quote unquote libertopia, but that's not anywhere close to where we are today. So fuck a whole lot of open borders. All right. Tom says, I read an article that showed that primates evolved with being able to digest fruit subsequently fermented, and that's where our bodies develop enzymes to break down alcohol better. It may be very possible. Jim Ricitelli says, Tom really, really, really knows his booze. That is true. You got to remember, guys, I have brewed my own beer. I have brewed my own alcohol. I have distilled my own alcohol. I've done it. It's fun. I wasn't any good, but I did it just because I wanted to do it. You know what I mean? I used glassware and stuff. I tried using copper wool for my catalyst to break down the fusel oils, and it didn't work. You really, really, really need to build a proper pot still. Is that the same as brandy? I get to use this. Brandy is just fermented wine, so you just make some wine and then you ferment and then you distill the wine. That's all brandy is, and you get all the lovely aromatics and all that. And a lot of the aromatics from the wine come through in the brandy, and the flavors come through in the brandy. I mean, I made some apple mead. That's the only thing I ever distilled, and then it came across just like that shit was like apple paint stripper, right? I mean, apple's flavored paint stripper. I didn't age it at all. And all you have to do to age it is stick a bunch of oak chips in it and just like sit in a corner for 6 or 8 years, and eventually it'll be good. Cut it 2 to 1 because it was like 70% alcohol, so cut it down to about 35% and go from there. Did you read the Zero Hedge top headline, the Lehman style on Deutsche Bank by Monday? I did see that. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm not going to be surprised when it happens. Let's just put it that way. I've been saying for years that I think Deutsche Bank is ground zero for the next financial crisis. Most Chinese rice wine tastes like crap, but I did taste some higher price wines that were actually very good. Again, it all depends on, what they were, look, it's like everything else. What you put in is what you get out. If you garbage in equals garbage out, especially in fermentation. It's such an uncontrolled thing, and it's such an art form. I mean, it's really such an art form. And I'm not very good at it. I should be, but at least I wasn't when I was in my 30s, but, how reliable or relevant is the traditional technical analysis in the current uncharted waters environment? To ask Arkfall. I'm not a big fan of traditional technical analysis. I don't do traditional technical analysis. I do quantitative analysis and bar-to-bar relationship analysis. Just simple comparisons of open, high, low, close, looking for reversals and horizontal resistance and support, and then some quantitative analysis as to, what your 1 sigma events would be. And then go from there, and then just look at them across time. I don't use MACD. I don't use momentum. I don't use any of the shit. I don't use Ichimoku clouds or any of that crap because every once in a while I may use a couple of moving average series, but not all that often because it's just, honestly, at this point, it's almost too much work. So, yeah. So there you go. How valuable is it? These are all completely cocked up markets. I still think they're still relevant because at the end of the day, as much as the Fed distorts things and the central banks distort everything and the whole world is upside down, at the end of the day, markets know what's going on. Markets know what is going on. And over the long enough, aggregated over a long enough time period, you can see the trends. So don't look at daily charts for the most part. Don't even weekly charts are even hard to get a good handle on. Look at monthly charts, look at quarterly charts. You'll see what's happening. Tom, if I ever go to prison, Jim Rosatelli says if you ever go to prison, you can open your own underground booze operation. Yeah, I'll be Hawkeye Pierce. It was Apple paint stripper. It was terrible, but hey, booze, war, immigration. What a pocket luck today. What do you think? Who do you think will win the Women's World Cup this weekend? The United States. Tom says, Jonathan, look, I'm black-pilled already. The math doesn't lie, and we're headed for a dollar debt crisis. That's true. Now, whether or not that leads to world war is a good question, and I think that really opens up a couple of years down the road after the crisis really begins. Everybody enjoys getting drunk because getting drunk's kind of cool, for the most part, as long as you don't overdo it. So I can't really do so much anymore. So there you go. I don't really have anything else to say tonight. It was an interesting week. It was a crazy week, actually, when you think about it in retrospect, right? You've got Trump goes to North Korea on Sunday. We've got an Iranian oil tanker seized by the Brits. You've got, I didn't even get to friggin' new leadership in Europe and how that's fucking everything up. I don't know if anybody looked at the markets today, but it was not the jobs report sending the markets where they went today. It was all about the realization that the EU just hired a bunch of incompetents and political appointments to run their empire. And these are people that will not change the status quo one bit, and they are completely and utterly insane, and the markets are finally realizing that Europe don't have a plan at all. So yeah, I mean, Ursula von der Leyen as the new Jean-Claude Juncker, please. Christine Lagarde running the ECB. I'm just waiting for them to say, that this announced that Mario Draghi is going to take over at the IMF. So there's just no change. It's going to just be exactly the same. At that point, they're just rubbing our nose in it that we can't do anything to stop them. I did miss your bonds pun. So Doug Murray said earlier something about bonds and chemistry and economics and made a bonds pun, and I missed it completely. I went bonds, and all I could think of was the 10-year. Fucking chemist, and I missed it completely. It's so sad. What we got? So Brett Harris with Israeli media. At the moment, it is known that an incident occurred in the U.S. territorial waters near Alaska when a U.S. submarine intercepted a Russian nuclear submarine. Huh. All right. Looking at the comments now, I'm not sure I want to talk about any of that stuff because that'll just make me sad. So, maybe Trump will appoint Draghi to the Fed chairmanship after all. Maybe he'd have to arrange for Powell to meet with an accident. But all right, guys, I know it's a little short tonight, but I don't have anything else to talk about. So, crazy week. Next week promises to be even crazier. We'll do this again on Monday night. I'll probably try and get a stream out on Sunday afternoon. I'm thinking maybe Sunday afternoon I should have some time. But tomorrow I've got, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. I got a bunch of stuff to do tomorrow as well. So trying to lighten my schedule a little bit. I have been working way too hard. So, all right, you guys take care. You be well. We'll talk soon. We'll talk Monday. Keep your stick on the ice.